Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou kata, kia ora koutou, te whanau atu tari nei, koutou, nā kai hau, o tu waka nei, para mai, tata mai, nohi mai, I te ratu te whakarau, tau taiko, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou kata. My name's Bill Moran and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Treasury. I'm also a Deputy Secretary, and as part of my responsibilities, I'm responsible for the oversight of economic strategy, which means I'm responsible for the long-term fiscal statement. In terms of that short mihi, what I was saying basically is we're all focused on the same destination in terms of we want better life outcomes for ourselves, but also our families, our friends, the community and New Zealand. And typically we paddle towards that point on the horizon individually, and the next 3 days is about how we do that collectively. And there's a big change going on in Treasury. We're 176 years old. There were actually Treasury staff at Waitangi in February 1840, and witnessed the signing of the treaty. So we've basically experienced everything that's happened in our political, economic, social, cultural history. So we're quite unique in that respect. But over the 176 years, our role has changed from cash and debt management to basically spanning everything governments do. So we basically observe and provide advice to governments about virtually everything that governments can do, contemplate doing. So we are quite unique, and our role sits at the centre of things. We have a whole of economy, whole of government view that no other institution has, and we'll have that through time. So we're not an iwi, but we're like an iwi in that we've got permanence. In 176 years' time, in 2192, there will be a Treasury. And so we've got a major stewardship obligation in terms of protecting and respecting the interests of all New Zealanders. And as a consequence, Parliament has given this Treasury quite unique independent functions, which no other Treasury in the world has. So we produce independent economic and fiscal forecasts every 6 months, the half-year update and in the budget. We produce every 4 years what we call an investment statement, which is a stock take on the state of the Crown balance sheet, which has got a sort of like 4 to 10 year perspective. Our forecasts have like a 4-year perspective. And then we have a long-term fiscal statement, which is basically a set of fiscal projections going out 40 years. But we've reinvented the mandate that Parliament's given us to actually be much broader than that, because the fiscal projections are based on policies which are driven by a whole range of objectives. And so we use the long-term fiscal statement to set out the key strategic policy choices facing New Zealand over the next 40 years. And in terms of how we produce the statement, if you look at the 3 statements up to the one that we're going to produce in October, they're all quite different. And the one we're going to produce in October is going to be quite different again. I think probably a key learning for Treasury in terms of the transformation we're going through was we've relied for most of the 176 years on importing ideas from the rest of the world. We've had some great ideas ourselves, and we're world leading in some areas, but we're not world leading in the areas that will make the biggest difference to shifting the lifetime outcomes of New Zealanders. And for us, we can't do it alone. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas. It means we need to work in partnership with our other agencies, i.e. jump in the back of their waka or tie our waka against their waka, or let people like you into our waka to help give us ideas about what will make the biggest difference in terms of improving the lifetime outcomes of New Zealanders, both the current generation and future generation. So the next 3 days is about actually getting your ideas about what you see as the key strategic challenges facing New Zealand over the next 40 years, and what you see as the key choices. And it's not a simple exercise, because in terms of how you think about those choices, there's a range of values and dimensions that you need to consider. And in terms of Treasury's role, because we are permanent, because we've got a stewardship obligation, because of the need to provide advice without fear or favour, we use a living standards framework to help us actually think about those choices in terms of the different values you might apply. And I guess the challenge for you this week, and the exciting opportunity for you this week, is basically thinking about what are the values you will apply to actually thinking about the choices that New Zealand faces. And it's not easy, because New Zealand, like the rest of the world, is becoming more complex and diverse. We've got an ageing population, but we've also got a very young population of minority populations that face major life issues. At the same time, we're becoming more independent with the rest of the world. Technology, information, communication revolutions are changing the way we work and operate, and will continue to do that. You know, the last 50 years may have been about information technology, IT. The next 50 years will be about ET, energy technology. So the things that have been out of scope will become in scope. So the world will be vastly different in 2055 than it is today. When I joined Treasury 31 years ago, I had a desk, had an old clunky telephone, and that was it. I didn't have a computer, I didn't have access to internet, there was no internet. Well, it was in its early birth stages. And you had to rely on a lot of engagement within the organisation to actually acquire knowledge, test ideas. And we had a tea room on the 4th floor, there weren't kitchens on each floor. And at 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock every day, people go down, have their cup of tea, and that's basically where you basically tested ideas, exchange views. These days, that people do it through blogs and internet and other means. So the world's vastly different compared to when I joined Treasury 31 years ago. Japan was the superpower and China was a backward economy. It's totally different now. And the world will be totally different in 30 years' time, 40 years' time. So the challenge for you is actually how do you think about the world in 40 years' time, and how do you basically bring the future into the present? Because if you know things will be different, then in terms of how you think about uncertainty, it's better to make decisions now, anticipating those changes. So I guess the challenge to you is to think about, well, what are those key strategic choices, and how do you apply values against those to assess what are the key trade-offs you need to make? And I mean, what does Treasury want out of this? Well, we want your ideas. We've done 4 McGuinness workshops, and all the ideas and concepts and metaphors that have come out of them have ended up in our advice in some shape or form. And some of the participants that have been involved in those workshops have ended up working at Treasury. So why do we do this? 1, we want your ideas to inform our long-term fiscal statement. 2, we need an informed public so that governments actually make rational decisions through time and don't make short-term political decisions, which means that as opinion leaders, because you are opinion leaders within your communities right now in terms of your cohort, but as you grow older and basically get into public and other forms of community activity, you will help shape the discussions and debates around key issues. It's really important you understand the frameworks we use in Wellington in terms of how to think about issues. So it's not brainwashing, it's actually giving you the tools to actually be really effective in terms of being opinion leaders. And probably the other issue was it gives Treasury a chance to test its own ideas, because it's very easy to fall into comfortable biases, and we need the challenge. So in terms of how I think about the Treasury journey, I've used this quite a few times with Treasury audiences, so they'll be used to it. It's a poem that Honi Tawhiri wrote about his great mate, Ralph Hoteri. And so I'll read the first and last verses, because I think, one, it highlights the journey that Treasury's on, but also it's a challenge to you in terms of how to think about the issues this week. So it goes, when you offer only 3 vertical lines precisely drawn and set into a dark pool of lacquer, it's a visual kind of starvation. So back in the 80s when I joined Treasury, the world was pretty binary, black and white, regulate, deregulate, nationalise, privatise, spend more, spend less, tax more, tax less. Actually, it's not like that today. And the last part of the poem goes, but when you score a superb orange circle on a purple thought base, I shake my head and say, hell, what's this thing called araha? And that's where Treasury's at. Basically, it's not about one single dimension, it's not about fiscal numbers, it's about people, their well-being. That's the thing that matters to us. And there's different ways of measuring that. So I guess the challenge to you this week is, how do you score a superb orange circle on a purple thought base?